He was a man who commanded boardrooms, whose name could move markets and build cities from dust. Yet here he sat in a forgotten diner, dressed in faded denim, looking like just another ghost, haunted by the open road. Julian Blackwood wasn't looking for a 5-star meal. He was searching for something he'd lost in his world of polished steel and empty luxuries, a piece of reality. But as the weary waitress set down his steak, her fingers brushed his leaving behind a folded note. He expected a flirtatious number. Instead, he read 5 words that shattered his solitude and plunged him into a danger far more real than any corporate takeover. The aroma of stale coffee and sizzling onions clung to the air inside the corner griddle, a smell as honest and worn as the cracked red vinyl of the booths. For Julian Blackwood, it was the smell of anonymity. For the past 6 months, since Eleanor had passed, this had become his sanctuary. He would leave his palatial estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, swap his Brioni suit for a flannel shirt and work-worn jeans, and drive his unassuming Ford F-150 2 hours north to the sleepy, overlooked town of Oakhaven. Here he wasn't Julian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Holdings, a titan of logistics and real estate worth an estimated $12 billion. He was just Jules, a man with weary eyes and a quiet disposition, who liked his steak medium rare and his coffee black. The staff a skeleton crew of a grizzled cook named Sal, and a handful of rotating waitresses had stopped trying to make small talk weeks ago. He was just part of the furniture now, the ghost in booth 4. His life had become a gilded cage. His children, Marcus and Cassandra, saw him not as a grieving father, but as a vault to be cracked. Every conversation was a transaction, a subtle angling for a larger inheritance or control of a new subsidiary. They moved through life with the careless entitlement of those who had never known struggle, a stark contrast to the life he and Eleanor had built from nothing more than a single truck and a shared dream. Eleanor. Her absence was a physical ache, a hollow space at every board meeting, in every echoing room of their mansion, and most acutely in the passenger seat of this truck. He was here today, for the same reason he was always here, to feel something real. To escape the sycophants and the predatory smiles of his own world. A waitress he hadn't seen before approached his table. She was young, maybe late 20s, with tired, intelligent eyes the color of a stormy sea. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple, severe ponytail, and her uniform, though clean, was frayed at the cuffs. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of exhaustion, but her back was straight, her chin held with a quiet defiance. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice low and steady, not chirpy like the others. "Please." "Black." Julian mumbled, not looking up from the worn Formica tabletop. She returned with a heavy ceramic mug and a pot pouring the dark liquid without a word. He watched her hands. They were steady, but the knuckles were white, as if she were holding on to something with all her might. "Ready to order, or do you need a minute?" she asked. "I'll have the griddle steak, medium rare, and a side of fries." It was the only steak on the menu. A simple sirloin, often tough, but always dependable. It was his ritual. "Got it," she said, scribbling on her notepad. Her name tag read, Clara. As she turned to leave, her eyes darted for a fraction of a second toward a man sitting in a booth in the far corner, partially obscured by a wilting potted plant. Julian hadn't noticed him before. He was big, with a thick neck and a surly expression, nursing a beer even though it was barely noon. He wasn't looking at the waitress. He was staring directly at Julian's booth, an odd, possessive glare. Julian dismissed it. Probably just a local sizing up a stranger. 20 minutes later, Clara returned with his plate. The steak sizzled and the fries were golden. It was a picture of simple, unpretentious comfort. "Here you are," she said, placing the plate down. As she did, her hand moved with unnatural speed. Her fingers, warm for a fleeting moment, brushed against his. It wasn't a flirtatious touch. It was deliberate, urgent. When she pulled her hand away, a small, tightly folded piece of paper from her order pad lay next to his fork. She met his eyes for a single, breathtaking second. Her expression wasn't hopeful or suggestive. It was pure, unadulterated terror. "Enjoy your meal," she whispered, her voice barely audible, and then she was gone, moving back towards the kitchen, her shoulders squared as if bracing for a blow. Julian's heart, which he thought had grown numb and slow, gave a hard, painful thud against his ribs. The world of corporate espionage, of hostile takeovers, and billion-dollar negotiations had taught him to read people to sense the shift in a room's atmosphere. And the atmosphere in this dingy diner had just dropped 20 degrees. His first instinct was to ignore it. He was here to escape complications, not to invite them into his life. This was someone else's drama. But then he remembered Eleanor. She had been the one who always stopped the one who would have seen the fear in that girl's eyes and refused to walk away. "The world is hard enough, Julian," she used to say. "Don't you dare be one of the ones who makes it harder by looking away." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the note. He kept his head down, pretending to reach for his napkin. He unfolded the small square of paper under the table, his thumb smudging the cheap ink. There were only 5 words written in a shaky, desperate script. "Help me. Don't react. He's watching." Julian's blood ran cold. He slowly lifted his head, his gaze sweeping the diner as if he were just another bored customer. He saw Sal through the service window, flipping burgers. He saw a family with 2 young kids arguing over a milkshake. And he saw the big man in the corner who was no longer looking at Julian's booth. He was staring directly at Clara, who was wiping down the counter, her movements stiff and mechanical. The man's eyes were filled with a chilling proprietary menace. And as Julian watched, the man gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. A silent warning. Julian Blackwood, the undercover millionaire, had just ordered a steak. But he had been served a plate of someone else's fear, and he knew with dreadful certainty that he couldn't send it back. The steak on his plate went from sizzling to tepid. The aroma of grilled meat was suddenly cloying, and the fries looked like pale, greasy fingers. Julian's mind, a finely tuned machine for risk assessment and strategic planning, kicked into overdrive. The note was a live grenade dropped on his table, and his every move was now critical. "Don't react." He forced himself to pick up his fork and knife. His movements felt stiff, robotic. He cut a piece of the sirloin, brought it to his mouth and chewed. It tasted like cardboard. He had to maintain the illusion of being Jules the quiet drifter. Any sudden change in his demeanor would be a signal, a betrayal of Clara's desperate trust. "He's watching." He risked another glance at the man in the corner. He was a study in coiled aggression, faded band tattoo on his forearm, a jaw that looked like it was permanently clenched, and a cheap leather jacket that seemed too tight for his bulky shoulders. He wasn't just a possessive boyfriend. This felt different, more predatory. This was a man who enjoyed control, who fed on fear. Julian had seen men like him in his early days, hanging around loading docks and warehouses bullies who used intimidation as their primary currency. Julian's world operated on power, but it was a sanitized power wielded through lawyers and proxies, through numbers on a screen. This was something raw, primal, and immediate, and Clara was trapped in its gravitational pull. He needed more information, but he couldn't speak to her. Not here. Not with the wolf watching the sheep. He needed to establish a second silent channel of communication. He ate slowly, methodically, his mind racing through options. A direct confrontation was out of the question. It would escalate the situation and put Clara in even greater danger. Calling the police was also a risk. Without context, it was his word against the man's, and it could be dismissed as a domestic dispute, potentially leading to violent repercussions for her later. No, he had to play this game on their terms, in the shadows. He finished about half of his meal, enough to look convincing. He flagged Clara down for the check, a perfectly normal gesture. As she approached, he kept his eyes on his plate. "Check, please," he said, his voice even. She placed the small bill folder on the table. Her hand was shaking, this time a tiny tremor that only someone looking for it would notice. "Everything all right with the steak?" she asked, the professional script sounding hollow. "It was fine," Julian replied. This was his chance. While she waited, he pulled a $20 bill from the worn leather wallet he used for his Jules persona. He also took out a pen from his flannel shirt pocket. On the back of his own napkin, hidden from the corner booth's line of sight by his body, he wrote a short message. He had to be careful. Nothing that could incriminate her if it was found. He wrote, "Parking lot. Back of blue Ford, 30 mins after close." He folded the napkin around the $20 bill and placed it inside the bill folder. When he handed it back to her, he made sure his thumb was covering the writing. He looked up and met her eyes again. This time, he tried to convey a message with his own gaze. "I am here. I will help." For a moment, her mask of weary professionalism cracked. He saw a flicker of something. Was it hope, or just more fear? She gave a tiny, almost invisible nod, took the folder, and walked to the register. The man in the corner, whose name Julian would later learn, was Vince, watched the entire exchange. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. He couldn't have seen the note, but he sensed the shift in the current. He stood up, throwing a few crumpled bills on his own table. He was even bigger, standing up a wall of muscle and menace. He walked past Julian's booth on his way out, deliberately bumping the table hard enough to slosh the remaining coffee in Julian's mug. "Watch it!" Vince growled, not as an apology, but as a challenge. Julian didn't rise to the bait. He just looked up, his face impassive, and gave a slow nod. He held Vince's gaze for a 3-second eternity. In that moment, a silent, primal understanding passed between them. Vince saw a rundown nobody. Julian saw a problem that needed to be dismantled piece by piece. Vince smirked a cruel twist of his lips, and then pushed through the diner's glass door, the little bell above it ringing mockingly. Julian let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The immediate threat was gone, but the danger lingered like the smell of cheap beer Vince had left in his wake. He paid for his meal at the counter, leaving Clara the tip without another word. He walked out into the grey, overcast afternoon of Oakhaven. The town suddenly looked less like a peaceful refuge and more like a cage. He got into his F-150, a truck chosen for its ability to blend in, and drove it to the far end of the shared parking lot, parking it under the shade of a large oak tree, the back facing a dense patch of woods. Now he waited. He had 30 minutes until the diner closed at 3 p.m., and then whatever time it took Clara to finish her side work. It could be an hour, maybe more. He settled in his mind, a whirlwind of contingency plans. He was Julian Blackwood. He had lawyers' security teams and near-limitless funds. But here in this parking lot, he was just Jules, a man with a pickup truck and a promise to a terrified stranger. And for the first time in a long time, he felt that the stakes were devastatingly real. The minutes stretched into an hour. The sky, a uniform slate grey, began to spit a cold, miserable drizzle. Julian sat in the cab of his truck, the engine off the silence, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the rain on the windshield. He watched the diner's entrance in his side view mirror. Sal the cook emerged, wiping his hands on his apron, before lighting a cigarette, and trudging to a beat-up sedan. A few minutes later, the lights inside the corner griddle switched off. Darkness fell inside the small building. Another 15 minutes passed. Julian's carefully cultivated patience was beginning to fray. Had she changed her mind? Had Vince come back? Was this all some kind of mistake? Then he saw her. Clara Mayhew pushed open the back service door, a thin coat pulled tight around her shoulders. She looked smaller and more vulnerable out here than she had inside. She scanned the parking lot, her movements furtive and scared like a doe at the edge of a clearing. Her eyes found his truck, and she hesitated for a long moment before scurrying across the wet asphalt, her head down, her body braced against the rain and an unseen threat. She didn't try the passenger door. She came right to the driver's side window. He powered it down, the soft whir of the motor sounding deafeningly loud in the quiet lot. "Get in," he said, his voice low but firm. "It's cold out." She hesitated again, chewing on her lower lip. I can't. If he sees me in a car with someone." "He's not here." "I've been watching," Julian assured her. "Get in, please." She finally relented, jogging around the front of the truck and climbing into the passenger seat. She brought the smell of rain and fryer oil with her. She didn't look at him staring straight ahead through the rain-streaked windshield. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were bone white. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. You looked different, kinder than most of the people who come in." "My name is Jules," he said simply. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Clara," he repeated. "Tell me what's going on. Who was that man?" She flinched at the mention of him. "His name is Vince. He was my boyfriend, my ex." She spoke the word ex as if it were a lie she was trying to believe. "We came here from Boston a year ago. A fresh start," he said. "But it was just a smaller town to trap me in." The story tumbled out of her in a hushed, frantic torrent. Vince was controlling, jealous and violent. He had isolated her, taken her car keys, and controlled her bank account, which held the meager tips she managed to hide from him. He had a sixth sense for when she was planning something, when she was feeling a sliver of hope. That's when he was at his worst. "Today he was angry," she said, her voice cracking. "I'd been saving up a little cash, hiding it in a loose floorboard in the apartment. I have a son, Leo. He's 6. I need to get him away from this. Vince found the money this morning. He took it. And he told me that if I ever tried anything like that again, he'd make sure I'd never see Leo again. He followed me to work today to make a point, to watch me." Julian listened, his knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. The casual cruelty, the deliberate stripping away of a person's hope and autonomy, it ignited a cold, calculated rage deep within him. This wasn't just a bully. This was a monster. "Why me?" Julian asked, his voice gentle. "Why slip me the note? He was watching you." Clara explained, finally turning to look at him. Her stormy eyes were filled with tears. "Vince sizes everyone up. He decides who's a threat and who's a sheep. He looked at you in your old clothes and your quiet corner, and he dismissed you. He told me before he left, see, not even a pathetic loser like that would look twice at you. He thought you were safe. He thought you were weak. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, weakness was the best disguise." The irony was so thick, Julian could taste it. The very disguise he'd created to appear harmless had become the reason she'd reached out. She hadn't seen a billionaire. She'd seen a man Vince underestimated, and in that she saw an opportunity. "You have a son," Julian stated the fact, anchoring the entire situation. This wasn't just about her. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Leo. He's the only reason I'm still fighting. He's with a babysitter now. Vince lets him go there because the woman is old and he doesn't see her as a threat. But I have to pick him up in an hour, and Vince will be there at the apartment, waiting. The timeline was tight. The walls were closing in. Where would you go? Julian asked. If you could leave right now, where would you go? I have a sister in Portland, Oregon. She said the name of the city, sounding like a mythical, unreachable land. It's a 3-day bus ride. I had almost enough for the tickets before he found the money. Now, I have nothing. Just the 20 you gave me. Julian's mind was made up. The ghost in booth 4 was about to become an active player. The resources of Blackwood Holdings were about to be focused on a small-time tyrant in a forgotten town. Okay, Clara, he said, his voice imbued with a calm authority that made her stop and stare at him. Here's what we're going to do. You're not taking a bus. You and Leo are getting on a plane tonight. But first, we need a plan. We can't just run. Men like Vince don't let go. We have to make him let go. He looked at her, seeing not just a victim, but a survivor with a spine of steel. She had taken an incredible risk on a complete stranger. Now it was his turn to prove that her faith, however desperate, was not misplaced. I need you to trust me, he said. Can you do that? She studied his face, the weary eyes that now held a spark of determination, the firm set of his jaw. He was still just Jules, a man in a flannel shirt. But for the first time since she'd met Vince, Clara Mayhew felt a fragile, unfamiliar tendril of hope take root in the barren soil of her fear. She nodded. Okay, Jules, I'll trust you. The first call Julian made was not to the police, but to a number encrypted on a burner phone he kept in the truck's glove compartment, a phone that connected him back to the world where he was not Jules but Mr. Blackwood. The call was answered on the first ring. Smith, a crisp professional voice said. David Smith was more than Julian's head of security. He was the executor of his will, both literal and figurative. A former Mossad agent with a mind like a steel trap and an unwavering loyalty forged over 2 decades of service. David was the one person who knew about Julian's Jules excursions. He viewed them as a reckless, sentimental indulgence, but respected the reasons behind them. David, I have a situation, Julian said, his voice low, as he drove away from the diner's parking lot, having instructed Clara to go about her routine. Pick up Leo. Go home and act as if nothing had happened. He promised he would be in touch. Define situation, sir. David replied, his tone already shifting from passive to active. Julian laid out the entire story, the diner, Clara, the note, Vince. He relayed every detail with the precision of a CEO, briefing his board on a critical merger. He left nothing out, including the raw, undisguised fear in Clara's eyes. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Julian could picture David in his state-of-the-art security office in the Blackwood Tower. Fingers already flying across a keyboard, monitors lighting up with data streams. Sir, with respect, this is precisely the kind of entanglement I've advised against. David said, his voice calm but laced with concern. Local law enforcement is not an option yet, Julian cut in. A restraining order is a piece of paper. It might provoke him. We don't have hard evidence of physical abuse that would guarantee an immediate arrest, and if they question her, and he finds out he could hurt her or the boy. We need leverage, David. We need to dismantle him before he knows we're a threat. Understood, David said, the argument settled. I need a name. Vincent. She just called him Vince. Big guy, mid-30s, brown hair tattoo on his right forearm. drives a rusted black Chevy Silverado late 90s model. Julian had clocked the truck parked near the diner, recognizing the vehicle of a predator marking its territory. That's a start. I'll run facial recognition against Oak Haven's public CCTVs and cross-reference with DMV records. Give me 1 hour, David said. What is your immediate objective? Objective 1, secure the targets. I want a private jet on standby at the nearest airfield, which looks to be Westchester County Airport. Destination, Portland, Oregon. Book a suite under the name Eleanor Parsons at the finest hotel in the city. Objective 2, provide them with a future. Set up a trust for the boy, Leo, and establish a fund for Clara. Make it untraceable back to me. Use the Eleanor's Haven charity account. Objective 3, neutralize the threat. I want to know everything about this man, David. Every unpaid parking ticket, every angry ex-girlfriend, every bar fight. Find his weakness. Consider it done, sir, David said. But what about you? Your protocol is to disengage. Protocol is suspended, Julian stated flatly. I'm not leaving until she and her son are on that plane. I gave her my word. He hung up and switched back to the cheap prepaid phone he'd bought for this very purpose. He sent a text to Clara. Stay calm. Act normal. Help is coming. I will message you when it's time. Meanwhile, back at the small rundown apartment she shared with Vince, Clara's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Leo, a bright-eyed boy with a mop of brown hair like his mother's, was playing with building blocks on the floor, blessedly unaware of the tension suffocating the room. Vince was there as she knew he would be. He was sitting in his favorite worn-out armchair drinking a beer, the television blaring a mindless sports talk show. Where you been? He grunted as she walked in. Took you long enough. Had to finish closing duties, she said, her voice a carefully constructed monotone. She knelt to hug Leo, burying her face in his hair, inhaling the innocent scent of him to quell her rising panic. That guy in the diner today, Vince said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the TV. The sad sack in the corner. He'll leave you a tip. Clara's blood froze. The usual, a couple of bucks. You were talking to him for a while when you gave him the check. I asked him if the steak was okay. She lied, her heart hammering. He said it was fine. That's it. Vince turned his head slowly, his eyes pinning her. You know I don't like strangers looking at what's mine, Clara. You remember that? He took a long swallow of his beer, then gave a smug, chilling smile. Don't you worry. Nobody's going to try to take you from me. Who would want a tired, broke single mum anyway? His words were meant to be corrosive, to eat away at her self-worth, to reinforce the walls of her prison. And usually they worked. But tonight was different. Tonight a tiny secret flame of defiance had been lit. A man Vince had dismissed as a pathetic loser had offered her a hand. The protector had misjudged his prey, and he had completely failed to see the other predator that had just entered his territory, a far more patient and lethal kind. An hour later, Julian's burner phone buzzed. It was a message from David, subject identified, Vincent Gallo, extensive juvenile record, 2 domestic assault charges in Massachusetts, both dropped when the victim refused to testify. Currently works off the books for a local chop shop, with known ties to organized crime out of Boston. He's small-time, but violent and unpredictable. More importantly, he has an outstanding warrant in Suffolk County for assault and battery. He fled before his court date. That's why they're in Oak Haven. He's hiding. A warrant. That was the leverage. That was the key. Julian's mind began to construct a plan, not with the brute force Vince would use, but with the quiet, devastating precision of a chess master cornering a king. He wasn't just going to get Clara and Leo out. He was going to make sure the cage door slammed shut behind Vince Gallo for a very, very long time. He sent a new text to Clara. "The plan has changed. We're not just running. We're fighting back. I need to know his routine. Where does he go? Who does he meet? Be my eyes and ears, but do not put yourself at risk." In the cramped apartment, under the watchful, venomous gaze of her captor, Clara read the message. We're fighting back. For the first time, she wasn't just a victim praying for escape. She was a soldier in her own liberation. The next 48 hours were a master class in psychological warfare, orchestrated by Julian from the anonymity of a motel room 2 towns over from Oakhaven, and executed by the invisible hand of David Smith. The plan was not a simple smash-and-grab extraction. It was a carefully designed gambit to make Vince Gallo orchestrate his own downfall. "The warrant is our legal weapon," David explained over their secure line. "But if we just call the local cops, he might get spooked and run, or worse, take her with him as a hostage. He's a cornered animal, sir. We need to lure him into a cage willingly." Julian agreed. "We need to separate him from Clara and Leo. We need him somewhere public, somewhere controlled, and we need him to feel confident, even arrogant, right up to the end." Their strategy formed around Vince's 2 primary weaknesses, his greed and his ego. David's deep dive into his finances revealed he was constantly in debt, always looking for a quick, easy score. His psychological profile, pieced together from past reports and social media footprints, showed a man who needed to feel superior, especially over those he perceived as weak. The bait was set. Using a shell corporation and a cutout, a private investigator David had on retainer, they manufactured a perfect opportunity for Vince. The PI, posing as a low-level underworld courier named Rick, made contact with the owner of the chop shop where Vince worked. Rick let it be known that his employers were looking for a no-questions-asked driver for a special job transporting a high-value stolen luxury car from a discreet location near Oakhaven down to a port in New Jersey. The payout was $20,000 in cash. It was an irresistible lure. More money than Vince had likely ever seen in one place for what seemed like a simple 4-hour drive. The chop shop owner, greedy himself, passed the offer to Vince, vouching for the contact. As they predicted, Vince's ego swelled. He was being chosen for a major league job. He saw it as a step up of validation of his tough guy persona. Clara, acting as Julian's inside source, confirmed Vince's excitement. She sent cautious coded texts from the bathroom with the shower running. "Clara, he got a call. A job. Says our money problems are over. Julian. When and where? Clara. Tomorrow night. 9 p.m. He has to meet someone at the old abandoned textile mill off Route 7. Julian. Is he taking you or Leo Clara? No. He told me to stay put and have a steak, ready for when he gets back with the cash. He's celebrating. The location was perfect. The old mill was isolated, with only one road in and out. David's team, a small elite group of plain-clothed security professionals, could lock it down without anyone noticing. "The stage is set, sir," David reported to Julian. "The state police have been briefed through a trusted back channel. They're aware of the warrant and are standing by a mile from the location. My team will handle the initial contact. We'll have the entire event on thermal and long-range video. When Gallo takes possession of the stolen vehicle, which is of course one of ours fitted with every tracking and listening device imaginable, we will have him on multiple felonies, including receipt of stolen property." "Good," Julian said. Now for Phase 2. The extraction. While Vince was dreaming of his payday, Julian was meticulously planning Clara and Leo's escape. On the night of the job, Julian would be waiting for her. The timing had to be perfect. He sent her the final instructions. He leaves at 8:30. Be ready. Pack one small bag for you and Leo. Essentials only. Sentimental items. Nothing he will notice is missing. At 8:45, I will be at the end of your street in a different car, a grey sedan. The moment he drives away, you walk out your front door. Don't run. Just walk to the car. We leave. The day of the operation was agonizingly slow. Julian felt a tension he hadn't experienced since the early days of his company, when a single bad deal could have meant bankruptcy. But this was different. The stakes weren't dollars. They were lives. That evening, as the sun bled out of the sky, everything was in motion. David's team was in position around the mill, invisible ghosts in the twilight. The state police were ready to roll. And Julian, now driving a nondescript Honda Accord, rented by David's team, was parked in the shadows a block away from Clara's apartment. At 8:31 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Clara. He's leaving. Julian's heart pounded. He saw the headlights of Vince's black Silverado flash as it roared to life. He watched the truck speed past the end of the street and turn onto the main road, heading towards the mill, towards the trap. Now. He put the sedan in drive and coasted slowly to the corner, stopping directly under a flickering streetlight. A moment later, the apartment door opened. A small figure, Clara, holding the hand of an even smaller one, Leo, stepped out. She carried a single backpack over her shoulder. They didn't look back. They walked with a determined pace, their silhouettes framed against the dim light of the apartment window. Clara opened the back door, ushering Leo inside, before sliding into the front passenger seat. She was shaking, but her eyes were clear and resolute. "Is this really happening?" she whispered, her voice thick with a mix of terror and elation. "It's happening," Julian said, his voice calm and reassuring. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the little boy in the back who was looking at him with wide, curious eyes. Julian gave him a small, warm smile. "We're going on an adventure, Leo." He pulled away from the curb, driving at the speed limit, melting into the sparse nighttime traffic. He was no longer Jules the drifter, nor was he Julian Blackwood the billionaire. He was simply the driver of a getaway car ferrying two innocent people away from the darkness and toward the faint, distant light of a brand-new dawn. The chessmaster's gambit was in its final critical phase. Vince Gallo felt like a king. The rumble of his Silverado's engine was a symphony of power, the cool night air whipping through the open window, a promise of freedom. 20 grand. With that kind of cash, he could disappear from Oak Haven, find a new town, a new girl. He briefly thought of Clara. She'd been useful, quiet. But he was moving up in the world. He deserved something better, something shinier. He'd leave her a few $100, maybe. He was a generous guy, after all. He turned off Route 7 onto the gravel access road, leading to the old Northwood textile mill. The building was a skeletal silhouette against the moonless sky, its broken windows like vacant eyes. A single pair of headlights flashed from the far end of the deserted parking lot. That had to be his contact. He pulled up alongside a sleek black Audi, a car that looked alien in this derelict landscape. The driver's side window rolled down, and a man in a sharp suit, Rick, leaned out. "You Gallo?" Rick asked, his voice businesslike. "Yeah," Vince grunted, trying to sound nonchalant like he did this all the time. "You got the wheels?" "In the bay," Rick said, nodding toward one of the mill's massive rusted loading bay doors. "Keys in the ignition. The cash is in a duffel bag on the passenger seat. Count it if you want. It's all there." Vince's heart thumped with greed. "And the package?" "The car is the package," Rick said. "Just get it to the address I texted you in Jersey by 6 a.m. Don't stop for anyone. Don't damage the merchandise. You get there, you drop the car, and you walk away. Simple. Vince smirked. Simple. Easy money. No problem. He got out of his truck and walked toward the loading bay. The air was still and heavy with the smell of mildew and decay. He slid the heavy door open with a groan of protesting metal. Inside, shrouded in shadows, was a pristine, new-model Range Rover, gleaming as if it had just rolled off the showroom floor. A wide, predatory grin split Vince's face. This was the life. He opened the driver's door and saw it a thick canvas duffel bag. Unzipping it, he saw stacks of $100 bills. He had never seen so much money. He didn't even bother to count it. He tossed the bag into the back, slid behind the wheel, and savored the smell of new leather. The engine purred to life with a touch of a button. He was so consumed by his triumph, so blinded by the promise of wealth and power, that he failed to notice the small, silent drones hovering like metallic dragonflies high above the mill. He didn't see the thermal signatures of a dozen men positioned in the surrounding woods, and he certainly didn't hear the whisper-quiet command given over a secure comms channel. Target has possession. All units execute. As Vince backed the Range Rover out of the loading bay, the world erupted in light. Floodlights from a half-dozen hidden positions simultaneously blasted the parking lot, turning night into brilliant artificial day. The access road was suddenly blocked by two dark SUVs that had approached without their lights on. Red and blue lights began to strobe, painting the decaying mill in frantic flashes of color. "State Police, show me your hands. Get out of the vehicle now." A voice boomed through a megaphone, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Vince froze his mind, unable to process the sudden, catastrophic shift. This was a setup, a trap. His elation curdled into pure ice-cold panic. His first instinct was to ram the blockade, but men in tactical gear were already swarming the Range Rover assault rifles leveled at his head. There was no escape. Defeated his dreams of 20 grand turning to ash in his mouth, Vince Gallo put his hands up his face, a mask of disbelief and terror. He was pulled from the luxury vehicle and slammed against its hood the cold metal, a shocking contrast to the warmth of the leather he had just been admiring. As the cuffs were snapped onto his wrists, a calm, well-dressed man, the PI Rick, approached the lead state trooper. "You'll find the Suffolk County warrant is active, and we have him on video taking possession of a vehicle he believed to be stolen, with intent to transport it across state lines. My client will be pressing full charges." Vince looked up confused, his eyes darting around wildly. "Client, what client? Who are you people?" No one answered. The cage had snapped shut. Miles away, Julian's burner phone vibrated. A single text from David Package is secure. Julian let out a long, slow breath. He was on a quiet stretch of highway, heading south toward Westchester County Airport. In the passenger seat, Clara was staring out the window, tears silently streaming down her face. In the back, Leo was fast asleep in his car seat, oblivious to the monumental shift in his life's trajectory. "It's over, Clara," Julian said softly. "He's been arrested. He won't be able to hurt you or Leo ever again." Clara turned to him, her face illuminated by the passing dashboard lights. The terror that had been etched into her features for so long was finally beginning to recede, replaced by a fragile, dawning disbelief. "How?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Who are you, Jules?" It was the question he had been waiting for. The identity of Jules, the quiet man in the diner, had served its purpose. It was time for Julian Blackwood to step out of the shadows. "My real name is Julian," he began, "and it's a long story. But right now, all you need to know is that you and Leo are safe. We're on our way to an airplane that's going to take you to your sister in Portland. When you land, There will be a new life waiting for you. He saw the confusion, the shock, the dawning realization in her eyes. He knew he was breaking down her entire perception of the world of the man sitting next to her. But for the first time, he wasn't doing it with the cold leverage of a billion-dollar deal. He was doing it to give someone back their life. And in the reflection of her tear-filled, grateful eyes, Julian Blackwood felt more like himself than he had in a very long time. The private jet sat on the tarmac like a graceful sleeping bird. It was a Gulfstream G650, the pinnacle of corporate travel, and to Clara it looked like a vessel from another planet. Leo, now awake, pressed his face against the terminal window, his eyes wide with a child's pure wonder. "Is that a spaceship?" he asked. Julian knelt beside him. "Close enough," he said, with a genuine smile. "It's going to fly you and your mum through the clouds all the way to a new home." Clara watched the interaction, her mind still struggling to reconcile the two images of this man. There was Jules, the quiet, kind man in worn flannel who had bought a cheap steak and listened to her desperate story. And then there was Julian, the man who could summon private jets and orchestrate police stings with a single phone call. As they boarded the plane, stepping into an interior of plush cream leather and polished mahogany, the reality of the situation finally began to sink in. This was real. The flight attendant greeted them by name. A small meal of Leo's favorite food, chicken nuggets and apple slices, was already waiting for him. Once they were airborne, soaring above the glittering tapestry of city lights, Julian finally told her everything. He spoke of his wife, Eleanor, and the emptiness her passing had left. He spoke of his disillusionment with his wealth, his children, and the life he had built. He explained that his visits to Oakhaven were an attempt to find something authentic in a world that felt increasingly fake. "I went there looking for a piece of my old life," he concluded, his gaze distant as he looked out the port window. "I never expected to find someone who needed help escaping theirs." Clara listened, her heart aching for his loss and swelling with an immeasurable gratitude. She had been saved not by a display of power, but by a man's search for humility. He wasn't a god descending from on high. He was a fellow soul adrift and searching who had chosen to answer her call for help. "I can never repay you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to," Julian replied, turning to face her. "Eleanor, my wife, always believed that the purpose of having anything money power, a voice, was to use it for those who have none. She wanted to start a foundation, a charity to help people, especially women and children, in situations just like yours. We never got the chance." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a simple, elegant envelope. "When you land in Portland, a car will take you to a new, fully furnished apartment. It's leased for a year, all expenses paid, to give you time to get on your feet. Inside this envelope are credentials for a bank account that has been set up in your name. It's enough to ensure you and Leo will never have to worry about money again." Clara stared at the envelope, speechless. "But this isn't charity, Clara. It's an offer." Julian continued, his voice earnest. "I am officially launching my wife's foundation. It will be called the Eleanor Project. It will provide legal aid, housing, and financial support for people escaping abusive environments. And I need someone to help run it. Someone who understands what it's like. Someone with courage, integrity, and a survivor's spirit. I'm offering you a job, Clara. Once you're settled, if you're interested, I want you to help me build this from the ground up." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy, not fear. He wasn't just giving her a fish, he was giving her the ocean, a purpose, a chance to turn her scars into a source of strength for others. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I would be honored." The rest of the flight passed in a comfortable, hopeful silence. When the jet began its descent into Portland, Julian prepared to leave. He was taking a connecting flight back to New York. His work here was done. At the door of the plane, Clara stopped him. "Julian," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You came to Oak Haven to find something real. I hope you know that what you did, saving me, saving my son, it's the realest thing in the world." He looked at her, at the strength that now shone in her eyes, at the sleeping boy in her arms. And he knew she was right. For months he had felt like a ghost haunting the edges of his own life. But in the worn-out booth of a greasy spoon diner he had been found. A desperate note from a terrified waitress had not just saved her life, it had in a profound way saved his too. It had reconnected him to the man he was when he and Eleanor had nothing but a single truck and a shared dream, a man who wasn't afraid to fight for what was right. As he watched the plane taxi away, carrying Clara and Leo toward their new beginning, Julian Blackwood felt the hollow ache in his chest fill with something new. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something quieter, deeper, and far more meaningful. It was purpose. And he knew Eleanor would be proud. And so the story of Julian and Clara isn't just about an undercover millionaire or a damsel in distress. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is found in vulnerability, and the most profound connections are forged in our darkest moments. Julian wasn't looking to be a hero. He was just a man looking for a reason to care again. Clara wasn't looking for a savior. She was just a mother fighting for her son's future. Their story shows us that you never know what battles the person sitting across from you is fighting, and how a simple act of courage, a whispered plea on a folded note, can change everything. It proves that beneath the surface of our ordinary lives, extraordinary stories of hope and resilience are waiting to unfold. If this story moved you and reminded you of the power of human connection, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We are dedicated to bringing you more stories like this, stories that inspire challenge and remind us of the incredible humanity that binds us all together. Thank you for listening.